Every day I'm living in a movie, lights out and the curtain drawn.
act like I know audio stuff. Perfect. And Chris is going to come down here, right? Yeah. All right. All right, first let me welcome you to LSUS. I hope this isn't the first time you've been on campus, but if it is, welcome. Please come back. Walk around, enjoy our nice campus, see how beautiful it is. I want to introduce myself. I'm Douglas White. I'm the director for the Center for Business and Economic Research here, and we're proud to have Reform Shreveport here and be the sponsors, or one of the sponsors of this event. I want to take a very brief moment to tell you a little bit about the center. There's supposed to be a QR code on the TVs. Maybe they'll come up. If it does, it will take you to the our webpage for the Center for Business and Economic Research. What we are, or what our goal is, we would like to be the data hub kind of for the Northwest Louisiana region. We put out an economic dashboard, quarterly economic dashboard that follows probably 20 to 30 different economic indicators to try and let people know what's going on in our local economy. We also have some data visualizations that update that data more frequently, usually monthly for some of the data, maybe even 2 weeks. We're also what's called a Census Information Center. Basically, what that means is we're supposed to be the public liaison between the U.S. Census and the local community. So basically what that means is if you need any kind of census data or data that the census might have, reach out to me and I can tell you how to get it, or I can provide it for you. Again, really the whole goal of the center is we want people to make informed decisions. There's a lot of, shall we say, anecdotal truth that maybe is not true about our region, and so we'd like to, instead of having people make decisions based on that kind of, well, my neighbor's moving, and they're moving to Bossier, and my other neighbor's moving to Bossier, so everybody's moving to Bossier. Well, no, actually, if you look at the data, we're moving back and forth across the river. So this is the type of thing that we want. It's like, let's make data-driven decisions. Let's make decisions based on reality, not necessarily what we think is reality. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Chris to introduce Reform Shreveport and to introduce the speaker that you all really came to hear. So, thank you.
Thanks, Doug. We really appreciate all the support that LSUS and the Center for Business and Economic Research has done in making this event possible. So we really appreciate you guys. I also want to take a quick moment to thank our advisory board. We formed our first advisory board after 7 years as an organization. We got our nonprofit status just a couple of years ago, and so we're chugging along trying to make long-term plans. If you are a member of the advisory board, would you just raise your hand or stand up? Give these guys a round of applause. I also would love to thank our members. We actually launched a membership campaign this year. If you're interested in joining up as a member, you can go to our website, reformshreveport.com, and not only see all the projects that we have done in the past, but also take a look at some of the things that we believe will make Shreveport a better place, and the mechanisms that we think will bring about that future. And if you are so inclined, we would love to have you join us as a dues-paying member so that we can continue to fund programs just like this one. I noticed that there were a few faces I didn't recognize. Are there people here who are from out of state or not from Shreveport-Bossier? Raise your hands. That's awesome. So glad you guys are here to kind of experience this with us. Yes, absolutely. We are going to be doing a Q&A after the presentation, and we're going to be doing it by note card just to make it a little more smooth. So if you would like a note card to make, Lavette has some here, and we're also going to have them on the back table if you need to kind of make your way to ask a question once the presentation is over. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, I just want to tell you a little bit about Reform Shreveport. So Reform Shreveport was started as an organization in 2016. Our very first guest was actually Chuck Marohn. When he was doing his first visit, he came and opened up our eyes to this idea of a new way of thinking about our community. And it started with a curbside chat, as he called it, which was a look at all the challenges that communities like Shreveport are facing and how to look at them in a way that's different so that we can solve those problems. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to be bringing to us today with this conversation about housing. As I mentioned, we have got a lot of programming that we're going to be doing this year. We're hoping to bring another speaker again in the fall, so stay tuned for that. But we have some really amazing engagements that we're doing right now, in particular along Kings Highway. If you're interested in learning some of that, ways that we're thinking about making that a safer, more pedestrian-friendly space for businesses, for residents, for students, to go all the way up and down Kings so that they can go from Centenary to LSU Health, or to go to the grocery store, or residents just going to and from the businesses that are in that area. So we're really excited about the progress that's being made there. We just recently helped champion an effort to bring about a resolution in Shreveport, or in Caddo Parish actually, which set us on a path to achieve Vision Zero, which is a goal to have zero deaths for pedestrians and alternative mode transportation users in the whole parish. And we're going to be working with the parish to help build out that plan. So there's a lot of things to pay attention to. Follow us on social media, visit our website, get plugged in, and be a part of reforming Shreveport. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker this evening. He is a recovering engineer, as he has put it, and has really taken the world by storm with his organization, Strong Towns. I'm so happy to welcome Chuck Marone to the stage. Thank you guys so much.
Hey, it is really nice to be here. This is the first day of our new book, and let me make sure this is going to work. Yeah, okay, wonderful. What does that sign say, please? Oh, no! I love Taco John's, too. Thank you. Is that a Taco John shirt you have on?
This is for Taco Wars.
Oh, Taco Wars. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I was not expecting that. That's a lot of love. So, when you threw me off a little bit. It's all right. When you do a new book, there's a ton of work that goes into it. Not just the writing. Then you hand it over to the publisher, and there's a whole process that you go through. It's very kind of like gut-wrenching. But through it all, like the question was, like, where do you want to be the day that this thing launches? And with the first book, I wanted to go to Memphis. So I talked a lot about Memphis in that book and all the great things that they're doing. With the last book, I wanted to go to Springfield. If you read my book, Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, it was really centered on a street in Springfield where a young girl had been killed, and all the kind of efforts to change and reform that. Despite that, I had a whole entire chapter about Shreveport in there, and about the I-49 project. And I wanted to come here, and I did get to come here as part of that book tour. But I told the team right away that I want to start this one in Shreveport. I find myself, as I travel around the country, being asked a lot, what are the places that are doing things right? And when I go through the list of places, I always throw you in there. I do. And I'm not saying that to patronize you. You can go back and look at the film. Because people record these things, they put them up. I'll say Shreveport, go to Shreveport. There's exciting things going on there. And when I say that, I'm not trying to suggest that like you're doing everything perfect, everything's right. This is all wonderful. But what I am saying is that of the places that I have been to where I find a roll up your sleeves, get it done, let's think incrementally, let's do what we can with what we have kind of ethic. An ethic of working together, I find it in a few places, and this is one of them. To me, this is a very special place, it's a very magical place. I realize that I'm not coming here as a multi-million-dollar rapper saying I'm going to redo your town. I'm really not. I'm coming here more as a way to acknowledge all the work that you have done and all the work that you are doing, and celebrate that with you. And say that as we talk about places that are doing the things to become a strong town, places that have the right kind of ethic about it, the places that are going about it the right way, you embody a lot of that. And I just wanted to come here and start by saying thank you, because it's wonderful. Yeah. I did. When we kicked off Reform Shreveport, I was the first speaker, I remember. And we had a great time. We packed the room, it was a lot of fun, a lot of energy, and I've been back multiple times since then, and every time there's been a lot of energy. So just thank you, thank you, thank you. With that being said, this is the first, we can call this the opening night of this book. This book, I was in Boise yesterday in Idaho, and I spoke at a conference, and I'm not exaggerating, there was 500 people at this conference. My publisher, they would not allow us to sell the books there. It was a conference, it was Boise Housing Alliance or something like that. It was the dumbest, I'm like, really? I can't sell them? No, the book does not come out till today. So they literally would not ship them, we were not. So this is the day that the book is actually available. This is the first day that we're allowed to have them shipped to us, that we're allowed to sell them or do anything with them. It's the first day that you can like get it on Amazon. So this is like literally the launch day, which is very, very special. I say that, thank you. I say that as a way to hedge. I always tell my team is that don't record the early book tour stops, record the ones after a few months, because I'm working through stuff. A few of you watched a web presentation we did of similar material last week. So I'm not saying you all are my guinea pigs, but I would appreciate harsher criticism tonight than maybe on a normal thing, because you'll help me make it better for the next time. When we ask people, is there a housing crisis? What we generally get from everyone is that yes, there is. But when we ask people, what should happen to address this housing crisis? What should happen to home prices? Should home prices go up or should they go down? Right? And what we see is that when we ask people, you get about an even response both ways. Newsweek did a poll. 43% of people said to fix this housing crisis, prices need to go up. 41% said to address this housing crisis, prices need to go down. How do you explain this? How do you explain this kind of different points of view? The reality is that when it comes to housing, we're having two very different conversations. They're conversations that don't overlap. They're conversations that are in many ways mutually exclusive. One of these conversations is about housing as shelter, as kind of the highest rung in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Where are we going to lay our heads at night? And the other conversation is about housing as a financial product. How are we going to have the economy grow? How are we going to create more mortgages, more commercial real estate products? How are we going to take these things which are central to our economic system and make sure that the number goes up? The trap that we have created for ourselves is that in one of these conversations, housing prices must fall. In order for people to get in shelter, in order for people to be able to live humane, moral, decent lives, they have to be able to afford a home. They have to be able to get into a home, and they have to be able to have the security of having shelter over their head. In one conversation, housing prices need to fall in order to make that happen. In the other conversation, housing prices cannot be allowed to fall, because if they do, it will actually destroy the economic system that we have built. It will undermine the solvency of banks, local banks, regional banks, national banks. It will threaten the entire economic foundation on which we have built our nation. This is the trap that we've created for ourselves. Housing prices need to go down. Housing prices cannot go down. And it made us have a conversation that at its base is incoherent. The first step to escaping the housing trap is to actually recognize that these dual purposes, these dual insights, housing as shelter and housing as an investment product, are incompatible with each other when it gets to the level of you and me. In the theoretical level of the macroeconomy, there's some way we can talk about these as the same thing. But when it gets actually down to you and me, what we pay for a house, these two variables conflict with each other in a way that is irreconcilable. If we go back and we look at the way we built housing around the world for thousands of years, it's very different than the way we go about doing it now. If you've been to any of my presentations in the past, you've seen these images. This is my hometown. By the way, I'm from the other end of the Mississippi River. So the Mississippi River actually runs half a mile from my house. And yeah, it's about from here to the back of the room wide, right? You can throw a softball across it. I live in Brainerd, Minnesota. It's a couple hours north of Minneapolis, St. Paul. This is the original iteration of this city. What you're looking at are little pop-up shacks, little buildings that people built. They didn't expect them to be around long, but it was like the first iteration of a city. Cities built in this way, these kind of temporary, small little buildings. And as more and more people would move to these neighborhoods, more and more people would move to these places, you would see a shift in the development pattern. You'd see an incremental growing up, an incremental growing out, and a thickening up and maturing of the neighborhoods. So after another 30-some years, this street would become this street, and then after a couple more decades, you would turn into this street here. Kind of an iterative process. Think of a culture growing in a petri dish. You get this growing out, growing up, and this kind of maturing in place. During the Great Depression, we financed housing. Well, let me back up and say this in a different way. Prior to the Great Depression, up until the Great Depression, we financed housing in a way that I think many of us today would find confusing. But people around the world, by the way, everyone asks me, yeah, you're gonna give me a thumbs up for Buc-ee's? I get people ask me all the time, why do you carry a Buc-ee's glass? Buc-ee's is like, it's like great American art, right? It's like,
It's the most extreme idea.
it is, no, it's the most extreme, right? It's exactly what it is like dogs playing poker manifested in reality. So anyway, if you went to buy a home at any point in American history, but particularly, let's look at the 20th century. If you were going to buy a home, you were going to have to purchase that home through a local bank. The local bank was going to require a large down payment, 50% down was fairly standard. The loan that you were going to get was going to be an interest-only loan, and that loan would come due, in a sense a big balloon payment would come due every 3 to 5 years. If you think about this from the idea of building things locally, there was a lot of sense to this. If a local bank was going to loan you 50% for a mortgage, they were literally taking the savings of other people in your community and lending it to you. They wanted to make sure that you weren't going to default. If you did default, they had plenty of equity that they could seize and make good on that, because they were literally spending the money of your neighbors to loan you to have this house. They also, as a local bank, and really big banks can't do this either, but particularly as a local bank, you couldn't take long-term interest rate risk. You had to be able to, in a sense, reset the loan every 3 years, every 5 years, in order to adjust to what the market was doing. If interest rates went way up, you had to be able to deal with that. If interest rates went way down, you had to be able to deal with that. As a local bank, you couldn't lock yourself in long term. The Great Depression is when this changed. And in the book, we talk about building the track during the Great Depression. The Great Depression caused a number of economic upheavals, but one of the things that it did for housing is it dropped housing prices dramatically. Housing prices fell by 40 to 50% right at the beginning of the Great Depression. I want you to put yourself in the mindset of someone who had a mortgage during that time and was paying that mortgage, paying the interest only every month, and knew that at some point it was going to reset. Your home value drops. So your home value is now less than what it was when you first originally made the loan. What we would see now is that the bank would now lend you up to 50% of that. They're going to lend you this much when your mortgage resets and comes due. The problem with that is that there's a big gap now between what the bank will lend you today and what they had lent you in the past. And that is the money that you were asked to come up with in cash to refinance. during the Great Depression, with housing prices dropping, unemployment at 25%, and the economy kind of spiraling down. A lot of people who could make their payments, a lot of people who could continue to make the payments that they have been making, couldn't come up with that cash difference. And so what happened is they got kicked out of their house. They were foreclosed on. When they were foreclosed on, what does the bank do with that house then? They don't keep it, they sell it. They try to get rid of it and recoup their money, right? What happens when you sell the house into a market that is declining? You drive down prices even more. When you drive down prices even more, the next person who has that reset has an even bigger gap of cash they have to make up. More homes were going into foreclosure. That means more homes being sold onto the market. That means prices going down even further. That means more homes going into foreclosure. And you created what economists call a deflationary spiral. Things started to spiral downwards, and there was no real floor to it. The further things dropped, the worse things got. There was nothing really to arrest that decline. One of the things that the FDR administration did in the early days of the New Deal was to try to deal with this deflationary spiral. They went in and they said to local banks, hey, before you foreclose, sell that loan to the federal government. So don't kick the people out of their house, sell that loan to us. And the federal government then would buy that loan from the bank. They'd make the bank whole so the bank didn't lose any money. And the federal government would go to the homeowner then and say, we will refinance it for you over a longer period of time. Instead of a 3-year, 5-year with a balloon, we'll do a 20-year loan. Instead of interest only, we'll make it principal and interest. So you'll pay it off. At the end of 20 years, you'll own it. They did things like lower interest rates. They created a secondary market for mortgages. So banks that had mortgages could sell them to this entity now called Fannie Mae that would then buy those. They would hold them, and then the bank could make more loans so we could get more people buying homes, stop that deflationary spiral. They lowered down payment to 20%, and the federal government started this thing called mortgage insurance. They would go to the banks and they would say, we know you want 50% down payment, go ahead and do 20%. We, the federal government, will insure that 30%. So if something happens and you lose money, we will make you whole. This was wildly successful, right? It stopped that downward deflationary spiral. And I'm going to say this, I think this is I think it was a very moral thing to do, right? A lot of people who, for no fault of their own, were making payments, were doing things in earnest, were getting kicked out of their homes. This stopped that, and it stabilized things. One of the problems with a 20-year loan is that it's very, very risky for banks. 3-year loans have some risk for banks. A 5-year loan, a little bit more. A 20-year loan has an immense amount of risk for a bank. Think about this for a second. Banks are borrowing short to lend long, right? A bank will borrow from you. You go put deposits into the bank. This is the way it used to work. It doesn't work this way anymore, but let's not deal with that. Back in the good old days, you would go deposit money in the bank. The bank would be borrowing from you short, and then they would lend long to someone else. They would say, all right, for 5 years, we'll lend you this money. For 3 years, we'll lend you this money. You can come in and collect your money at any time. It's just a money on deposit. That's what's called short term. Long term, you can't collect if they're continuing to make their payments. And so banks, this is risky for them. This is how they make their money. But it also creates this kind of risk scenario for them. Let me use both of my hands here to kind of illustrate. If you are a bank and you have Tim comes in and makes a deposit and you're paying him this much. And then you lend it out and you can charge the person this much for the next 5 years. That difference between those two is the money you make. And we're like, yay, banks, it's an easy job, right? It is an easy job until interest rates go up. Why would interest rates go up? For a variety of reasons. The market is riskier, inflation goes up, what have you. Well, all of a sudden interest rates go up to here. Well, Tim's got his money in the bank. And Tim says, I'm not going to keep my money in the bank unless you pay me this much interest, because that's the going rate. If you don't, I'm going to come take my money out of the bank, and I'm going to go put it in a bank that will pay me that much interest. And so the bank, in order to keep your money, because they need your money to make loans, is going to have to pay you more interest. Now the bank is losing money every month, right? They're losing money every month. If you do that for 3 years, 5 years, you can maybe make it through. You've got enough reserves, you've got enough money sitting around. You're not happy about it, right? It's not good. But if you lock yourself in for 20 years, you can lose your bank. This is where banks get in a lot of trouble. So borrowing short to lend long is a very, very risky thing. What happened in the Great Depression is the federal government said to banks, we got your back. We know that what we're asking you to do is not good business sense, to have these lower down payments, these longer, we know this doesn't make sense. So we will provide an off-ramp for you so that if you get in trouble with this, we got your back. We will take care of you. We will make sure that this doesn't go bad for you. What we want is we need you to stabilize the market. And that's what happened. We stabilized the market and it went great. At the end of World War II, the economists around the president were freaked out. They were freaked out because when we demobilized troops and we shut down all these industries, they were worried we were just going to go right back into the depths of the Great Depression. The leading economist at the time wrote a memo to FDR and said, if the war ends suddenly, there's going to be the greatest period of unemployment and industrial dislocation any economy has ever faced. We're just going to go right back into the depths of the Great Depression. Is that what happened after World War II? No, right? What happened? We built a new version of America, right? We took all of our wealth and capacity and industrial might, and we poured it into turning cities into machines of growth, building a middle class, creating interstates and infrastructure and all this stuff that created essentially what today we think of as the American dream. Here's the fascinating thing from a housing standpoint. From a housing standpoint, what we discovered at the end of World War II was that all of the tools we used to stop the deflationary spiral, stop things from spiraling down out of control, worked really, really well to make things go the other way. All those things we did, lowering down payments, lowering interest rates, extending out terms, 20-year loan, how about a 30-year loan, doing mortgage insurance, all this stuff allowed more people to get into more homes. And the reality is it allowed more people to pay more money for more homes. And so in the couple decades after World War II, we had a tremendous explosion of economic activity driven largely by home mortgages. This was wildly, wildly successful. At the end of World War II, we had an economy that was growing, but the growth took off. This is the 25 years after World War II. So basically like the first generation of suburban expansion grew our economy massively. It also took the very, very high federal debt we had at the end of World War II, and while that grew slightly, it did not grow nearly as fast as the economy. And what this means is that the debt to GDP ratio, which is a kind of indicator of the capacity of our economy, went way, way down in a positive way. When economists talk about this, even today we talk about growing our way out of debt. They're really talking about the couple of decades after World War II, where we grew and grew and grew our economy, but we hardly grew our debt at all, and as a ratio it came way, way down. It made our debt more manageable, made that burden a lot less. What economists often don't talk about, though, is how we achieve this growth. They talk about it as if it was like a magical thing that happened, but the reality is that while we weren't adding to our public debt, we were adding to our debt. We just added to it in private mortgage debt. In the 25 years immediately after World War II, that first boom, that first economic boom of suburban expansion, we increased our private mortgage debt by over 1,000%. We financed the expansion by citizens taking on large amounts of debt instead of the government. As this went on over time, what we found is that every time our economy ran into distress, there was a ready remedy. And that remedy was, in one point, optional, and at another point, then forced upon us. This is a map of the Case-Shiller Index. The Case-Shiller Index is, I don't have oops, now I screwed up everything. There we go. The Case-Shiller Index is a chart of housing prices over time, kind of indexed to people's capacity to pay. So what you're looking at here is at the end of World War II, up until really 2010, the Great Financial Crisis. You're looking at what housing prices have done. Let me walk you through this story here. I'm gonna grab my own pointer so I can use the thing. This is the boom after the end of World War II, and you see prices came way up, and then there was this kind of long period of moderation. We ended up having an inflationary episode at the end of the 1960s. All that boom, all that money in the economy, all that flowing, the economy started to overheat. When the economy overheated, interest rates went way up, and when interest rates went up, the economy started to crash, housing started to crash, and you see this downturn. That we're gonna call the first inflation bubble right here. Then in the late 1970s, we had the same thing. Economy, we kind of bailed out the banks, we put a bunch of money back in the economy, we actually lowered interest rates some more, we reduced down payments, extended terms out, we created more of those government-supported entities to buy mortgages from local banks, and we were able to kind of get the economy going again. But you see this second kind of bubble come up. High interest rates in the early 1980s knocked that back down. In the 1980s, we experimented with deregulation, the idea that we could get the economy growing a lot again, we could really make things work well. If we deregulated the housing sector, we wound up with this, the S&L bubble. And when we got done with that, we said, okay, deregulation didn't work so well. We're going to decentralize things. We're going to make this really bottom up. We're going to give a lot of power to local banks to write a lot of loans. Again, lowering the down payments that were required. We actually got to 0 down payment at one point. We're going to have no down payment. We're going to have a very robust secondary market. And we got the subprime bubble. You'll see that each of these events kind of gets bigger, bigger, bigger in magnitude. As we go on, what we see is that housing as a part of the economy becomes more and more central to the conversation. In fact, when we hit that deregulation phase, one of the things we did to juice the economy and juice the housing market is we went to local banks and we said, if you want to hold mortgages, and what is actually technically mortgage-backed securities, a bundling of many, many different homes together, if you want to hold these on your books, you can. And as long as they are rated AA or higher, you can count them as reserves in the same way that you would count US Treasury notes or cash. So all of a sudden, banks, instead of holding just cash, which would not pay anything, or instead of holding Treasury notes, which paid very little, they could go out and buy a bundle of mortgages that would pay significantly more and use that as their reserves. It created an insatiable demand for more and more and more mortgages to be created. That's what we saw in this bubble here. After the subprime bubble, there was this is the part that gets a little foggy because we haven't seen it play out yet. We don't know how the story ends. We can only kind of surmise at what's gone on. I'll point out that at the end of the subprime bubble, you have this generation of millennials that is reaching their house buying age, basically. They were graduating from college, they were entering midlife, the point in time where people would normally buy a house, stop being renters and purchase something. That was really 2010 to 2016. In that time frame, there was a huge bubble of people entering that age. Really the echo of the baby boom is what we're talking about. And during that period of time, we just stopped building houses. And we stopped building houses for very logical reasons. There was a glut of housing on the market. We had overbuilt in 2000 to 2008. Banks stopped lending to individuals. So it was very, very hard to qualify for a mortgage. It was hard to get into a home. And home builders responded by just not building. And so we had extended period of time where people didn't build, despite this big boom in demand that was flowing through the market. In this same period of time, post-2008, we had, I'm going to say, a need. I don't think that's probably going too far. We certainly had an obsession with a housing recovery. And there was a lot of discussion about how do we get the housing market to recover. One of the ideas that was thrown out by really the highest economic official in the land was that we could turn a lot of these vacant homes, or a lot of these foreclosed on homes, into rental properties. And so what happened, and this is exactly what happened, a lot of money went in the recovery from the great financial crisis, went into large banks, went into hedge funds, and essentially what we saw is that the people closest to capital were able to go out and outbid people in the marketplace for homes. There's a concept in economics called the marginal buyer. There might be a price that you're willing to pay, and you're willing to pay, and you're willing to pay, but if that price is not as high as the highest person is the market maker, the marginal buyer, they're the one that will set the price. And they'll set the price, in a sense, for the entire market. And what happened after 2010 is that the buyer, the primary buyer, was a hedge fund. The primary buyer was an investor. And even if they weren't buying the bulk of the homes, they were setting the price for the rest of the market. And that price was an all-cash sale, and it was very high. Again, back to the Case-Shiller Index. Economists around the world, and if you listen to US economists, they are not shy about calling 2000 to 2008 a housing bubble, right? I've written up their subprime bubble. If you see people call it the subprime crisis, the subprime bubble, the housing bubble. Nobody has a problem with the term bubble. You can go to any collection of PhD economists and say housing bubble, and they will say yes, 2001 to 2008, housing bubble. Those same people will then call this a housing recovery. And we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to recover to a bubble, right? A bubble is meant to denote something artificial, something that was created not by supply and demand, but really by financialization, by financial trickery. We induced a bubble, we poured a bunch of money into something, it artificially inflated the price, and then that price was going to correct. We have done everything we can to, in a sense, recover to a bubble condition, and that's where we're at today. If you recognize this, you need to recognize what these are. I said there's two conversations going on in housing. There's a housing as shelter conversation, and there's a housing as financial conversation. Look at these two things and recognize that these are primarily today financial products. They are products that are being built in the scale that they are being built and at the demand level that they are being built, not because they are great products for us to buy and consume, not because there is huge demand for them in the marketplace, but because they're easy to bundle, easy to securitize, easy to package and sell off to pension funds and other investors around the world. These are great financial products. The idea that you go out and buy a home and that is a transaction is a very quaint one. Who is the product? What is the product here, right? I buy a house, I'm the consumer, the house is the product. And from the ground level, like that can kind of look like what the transaction is, right? But that's not what's really driving the economics of the purchase. What's really driving the economic purchase is not what is the product, but really who is the product. What we are doing when we buy houses is we are creating a financial product called a mortgage. When we build a 5/1 apartment building, we are creating a financial product called a commercial real estate loan. These loans are sold off onto a secondary market. They are purchased by bundlers. Bundlers package them together. They cut them up into small pieces. They sell them as stocks to investors and pension funds and all kinds of savings institutions around the world. They are bought up often by banks, which use them as their reserves. And so when we look at a house and we say, well, you went out and purchased a house, You went out and created a mortgage, and that mortgage is now the foundation stone of our economy. It sits at the heart of every bank. It sits at the heart of every financial institution. It sits at the very core, the very foundation of our economy. If we look at what we try to do to address housing affordability today, it really comes down to this. We try to make it easier for more people to borrow more money, to pay more for housing. We lower down payments. Makes it so you can pay more, right? We lower interest rates. Makes it so you can pay more. Sometimes we have first home buyer programs, allows you to pay more. We backstop it with mortgage insurance, which allows you to pay more. The president just came out with a plan to give tax breaks to people who are buying homes, which will allow you to pay more. This approach does not work. This is the approach that a financialized system delivers us. Because in the finance of housing, housing prices cannot go down. They have to go up. So in order to make it work, we have to pay more. If you think this through to its logical conclusion, the next product on offer is already starting to show up, is the 40-year and 50-year mortgage. Because this will allow you with the same payment to pay more for the same house. That's what's being pushed around now. That's what's being shopped. That's the thing that is being touted as the way we alleviate this housing crisis and get more people into more homes. This is not the answer. The thing we have to ask ourselves is, are we trying to make affordable housing, or are we trying to make housing affordable? When we look at affordable housing proposals, often it is things like, all right, you're going to build 40 new homes. Can we get 3 of those or 4 of those to be affordable? And if you do, we'll give you a little incentive or a little cash. Can we come in and get the federal government to pay a little bit so we can lower the prices on these half a dozen homes we're building over here and make them affordable? Can we get someone to come in and build a Section 8 thing and make that affordable? And we struggle with this because we never really like the outcomes. The outcomes don't really work. But the heart of the problem is that this approach doesn't scale. I was in a city a couple weeks ago, and they had gone through, moved heaven and earth to get 40 affordable housing units built. And they brought me out and they showed me, and they were all proud and all excited. And then we were talking, and they said, yeah, we have a housing study that says we need 6,000 affordable housing units. I'm like, well, this doesn't scale. Are we trying to build affordable housing, or are we trying to make housing affordable? They're two very different approaches, two very different things. And what we need to focus on is how we actually make housing broadly affordable. That's what I want to share with you now. How are we going to do this? And one of the reasons I'm here is because you all are crazy enough to do this. Okay? We can do this. We can do this at scale. You all are crazy enough to do it. And I actually need you to do that, because I need you to show the rest of the country that this can work. I apologize for being an engineer. I like charts. I like graphs. This is a standard bell curve. I've said this is distribution of investment capital for housing. The bulk of our money today is spent on 2 financial products, right? Single-family home, we build them at scale. The 5/1, you've got 1 story of concrete construction, 4 or 5 stories of wood construction. These can be made at many different price points. So you can do them as apartments, you can do them as condos, you can do them as luxury condos. These are being built everywhere. You've got some in your community. These are great financial products. They're very easy to standardize. They're very easy to bundle with other similar things. Very easy to securitize. The bulk of our capital goes to those 2 things right there. On the far end of the spectrum are houses for rich people. Houses for rich people are easy to finance because rich people have money, right? No one is worried about getting rich people into homes because they can generally pay cash, and when they do borrow money, they have lots of reserves backing them up. This is not a hard transaction to make. What is completely absent from our market is anything at this end of the spectrum. That is where we can make a huge difference. And understand what I'm suggesting. A market without an anchor is a runaway market. A market that has no low price point offering is a runaway market. A market where if you had a market for shoes, but the only shoes that you could buy were Gucci sandals and like Air Jordans. There were no penny loafers, there was nothing. What you would see is that the price of those things would just go up because there's nothing anchoring them down. We can, in our local market, at really no cost, build at scale tons of those units at that level and anchor our market to a price point so it actually starts to respond not to the macroeconomy, but to our ability to pay. And that's what we want. We want a market that is ultimately locally responsive. What do those units at that end of the spectrum look like? They look like this. This is a single family home. Nobody really finds these offensive, right? We build lots of them. But there are a lot of people, particularly people who are in retirement age, who no longer need 4 bedrooms. A lot of these times, people are house rich and cash poor. So maybe they need to fix the roof, maybe they just need some extra income because they're on a fixed income now. Whatever it is, these are people who have a lot of asset, but not enough cash. These are also often people who could use an extra hand around the house. Someone to, in Minnesota, shovel the snow, maybe down here, mow the yard, pluck some weeds, be there to help maybe drive to the grocery store, what have you. There's a social dimension to this that we can, don't have to overlook. The idea that you could take one of these spare bedrooms, put in a firewall, a kitchenette, and an exterior door, and rent it out is physically very simple to do. It's very easy to do. It is hard to do from a regulatory standpoint. It is hard to do from a financing standpoint. And it's hard to do from a construction standpoint. If you were someone who wanted to do this, but you didn't know contractors, you didn't know how to make that work, you didn't know how to get the financing done, or you weren't really interested in a second mortgage, well, that's going to be a pain, I'm not sure I want my kids to have to deal with that. If you're like, I don't know how to go to City Hall and go through the whole process of getting this done, this very, very simple thing becomes really, really hard to do. We need to make that thing very simple to do. Because there are lots and lots of people who would do this tomorrow if it was very simple. This is a backyard cottage. Stop calling them ADUs. ADU sounds like a planner geek technical term, and no one wants an alien in their backyard. When you say a backyard cottage, everybody gets that, right? I asked this yesterday in Boise because they were looking at me kind of weird. I said, who here in the room lives in a 400 to 600 square foot home? Who in this room has, at some point in their life, lived in a 400 to 600 square foot home? Yeah. Do you see the difference there? When we don't allow this kind of entry-level rung in our system, we don't let a lot of people get started. That entry-level rung used to be there, is not there anymore because you can't finance it. It's hard to build, it's hard to create, and from a regulatory standpoint, we make it prohibitive to do. These things should be really, really, really simple. This is a starter house. It is not a tiny house. Stop calling them tiny houses. They're not like freak shows, right? For thousands of years around the world, we built starter houses. If you go to some of your old neighborhoods and you look at the housing stock in those neighborhoods, if you look closely, you will see embedded in some large homes the original starter home. Because what do you do with a starter home? Something 400, 500, 600 square foot. Well, when you save up a little bit of money, you put an addition on the back. When you have a kid, you put on a second story. the neighbor comes over and helps. You go help them. It's a very natural process that we see repeated over and over again around the world, literally for thousands of years. Every place that we've ever excavated a civilization has lots of starter homes. In my city, if you want to build a starter home, you have to meet all the provisions of a regular home. Then you have to meet subpart A through M of the tiny house ordinance. You have to go beg permission from your neighbors. You've got to go genuflect in front of the planning board. We make this whole long process to build something that the bank won't give you a loan for. We make it really, really hard to build an entry-level product. Something that would anchor our market at a low price point and stop this crazy inflation of prices. Here's the thing. We can build all these units right now. As a community, if we are ready to roll up our sleeves and do some things that are not hard, but are different, we can build these units at scale. Our strategy to escape the housing trap is very simple. We need reforming of regulations and codes to make this stuff easier. We need to create an ecosystem of incremental developers that will do this work. And we need to create local financing options so that we can finance these products that are very easy to do and easy to finance, but there is no secondary market, there is no overwhelming market for them. And so they are not really readily available anywhere. Let me go through each of these with a little bit of detail. When we talk about code reform, we're really talking about allowing our neighborhoods to evolve and change. At Strong Towns, we have a saying, no neighborhood can be exempt from change, but no neighborhood should experience radical change. Part of the marketing brochure of the post-war suburban experiment that we have embarked on is that we will build your neighborhood to a state of permanent prosperity, and then we will lock it in place. And what we have seen now in 3 generations of doing this is that that approach does not work. We can create a prosperity for a period of time, but after a certain period of time, things start to atrophy, they start to fall apart. If we go out and build a subdivision with 40 homes in it, or 400 homes in it, and we build them all within a couple years of each other, what we find is that for a generation, for a couple decades, that neighborhood can be really nice. That's where all the wealthy people want to be, and that's a great place, right? But 25 years later, everybody's roof goes bad at the same time. Everybody in the entire neighborhood had their roof put on at the same time, they age out at the same time, and they all go bad at the same time. Everybody needs a new roof. Everybody's siding goes bad at the same time. Everybody's sidewalks crack and need to be repaired at the same time. Everybody's appliances go bad simultaneously throughout the entire neighborhood. So what happens is that there's an echo effect. Everything's brand new, it's very nice, and then all of a sudden, bam, it all goes bad all at once. What do the affluent people in that neighborhood do? They leave. That's right. Because they see the place starting to fall apart. They see and they go and buy in the next new subdivision that you annexed out on the edge. And we call that success, and we call that growth, and this is the new thing we're going to do. And we leave behind a neighborhood that not only is in decline, is struggling to maintain itself, and maybe it will for a while, right? Maybe heroic people will come in and I'm going to maintain things, I'm going to take care of things. But over time, when there's no mechanism to advance that neighborhood, no mechanism to mature that neighborhood, when the zoning codes and the building codes and all of our regulations say, if you are a single-family home today, forever a single-family home you will be, world without end, the neighborhood is stuck. And when you're stuck, there's only one direction to go. It might take a decade, it might take a lifetime, it might take 50 years, but eventually that neighborhood will go into decline. We have to allow all of our neighborhoods to evolve and change. If there's a neighborhood of single-family homes, there really should be no regulatory friction for that neighborhood evolving over time into a neighborhood of duplexes. I get people who push back on me and say, well, Chuck, this is a very quaint idea. It's really nice if you can evolve neighborhoods, but incremental development has never really created anything big or anything magnificent. It's certainly not up to the problem that we have today. I threw this in just for those people who might have that critique. This is a part of our country. This is a photo in 1878. We'll see if you recognize it here at some point. Here's the same street in 1898. Now we're at 1911. You might recognize it now a little bit in 1918. I'll skip to today. That's Times Square. I'm going to say this again. Everything that we ever built prior to the post-Great Depression, post-World War II pattern of development, every big city, every magnificent thing was the end result of many, 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 many generations, many, many iterations of incremental development. Incremental does not mean slow. Incremental does not mean small. Incremental just means you take one step, and then the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And that is how you build successful places. When we try to do this, when we try to make a massive leap, it feels for a moment like we're doing something successful, right? We're taking single-family homes and we're converting them into this, massive investment, right? You all see this now for what it is, right? It's a financial product. That's why this is being built there. Because someone will finance it, and that financing product can be then rolled over once this is completed to a secondary market and bundled and securitized. That's what that is. But understand what that does. It looks like success because you get a bunch of housing built. But what does it do to the entire neighborhood around it? It stagnates it artificially. I mean, these homes are boarded up, right? Everyone who owns those places recognizes what is going to come next for them. What's going to come next for them is they're going to be turned into a huge tower like that one. And so the people in this neighborhood, and you can see this when you go a block over or 2 blocks over, the people in this neighborhood all recognize that their house is like there's a timer on it. And the way they're going to get the most cash, the most investment, the most return on their property is to actually sell it to someone who will do a conversion like this. And so the idea of repainting the house or redoing the roof or putting flowers in the front yard, putting in granite countertops, that all goes away. Like, why would you ever do that? No one's going to buy this house to live in it. Whoever buys this house next is going to either, 1, redevelop it as part of a big leap like this, or 2, become a slumlord and try to cash flow it out until they do sell it for redevelopment. These large leaps feel like success, but what they do is they artificially stagnate the neighborhood. They actually make it harder for normal people to do normal things with their houses. And what we need for our market to anchor at that low price point is for normal people to do lots and lots of things with their homes. We need to make it very simple to build the next increment. And I put this down as the standard, and I'm shocked by how many people react with shock by it. You should be able to, if you want to make an accessory apartment in that spare bedroom, if you want to put in a backyard cottage, if you want to build a starter home, you should be able to complete your permit application, walk into City Hall with it done by 9 a.m., walk up by noon with permission to build, and be started after lunch. If our system does not allow that, if there's more friction in our system than that, we're doing something wrong. We need to figure out how to make our workflow internal to City Hall to meet that standard. And we need to do things to get out of the way too, right? Eliminate parking minimums is kind of the easiest one. Let me say one thing about parking. When people go in and they want to do the accessory apartment or they want to put the backyard cottage in, the thing that people show up and say is like, oh my gosh, what if there's parking problems? What if there's traffic problems? And they'll throw these out, like, do a traffic study, do this, like they'll throw all these things to try to stop this next little increment. I want you to understand the discussion that is going on. The discussion that's going on is, we know that we are experiencing pain and distress because of housing unaffordability. We all know that. We talk about housing prices, there's pain and distress. We would rather experience that pain and distress than whatever pain and distress would come from having a few less parking spots or a little bit more traffic. If you can have that conversation and say, we choose one stress over the other, I think that will go in the direction of housing. Don't let this just be a thing where like, okay, we got to deal with parking or we can't do anything. You're never going to have a city that is pain-free and stress-free. I'm in Shreveport. Do I have to tell you this? Right? We have to decide what stress we will accept and what stress we are going to be more sensitive to. And the reality is today is that you are obscenely sensitive to the stresses of not having enough parking and not being able to flow traffic quickly enough through your neighborhoods, when that is not your stress. Your stress is really about how do we build more stuff. We need to become more sensitive to that. We need to grow an ecosystem of incremental developers. These people are heroes in our community. We often talk poorly about developers. We don't like developers. We don't like what they do. Okay, fine. I think when you're bringing in lots of outside capital and looking at changing a neighborhood overnight to be kind of unrecognizable. But when you get good incremental developers, they are working in the neighborhood to thicken up the neighborhood, make it a better place, provide things people want. You have some amazing incremental developers in your city. I've met them. I've chatted with them. They're beautiful people. They're doing amazing. They're doing God's work. They really are. They're taking your neighborhoods where people are struggling and they're providing all kinds of options for them. Here's the thing about being an incremental developer. It's really, really hard. You have to be good at like a ton of different things. What we find is that places that support incremental developers do a couple of things. One is they get them together. They have them, in a sense, like help each other. Hey, I was trying to get this finance at this bank. Yeah, don't go talk to that guy. Go talk to that guy over there. He gets what you're doing. Oh, I had this carpet layer and he was a pain in the neck. Yeah, I use this one over here. He's really great. These are things that when people are meeting together, chatting together, kind of like a Rotary Club for incremental developers almost. You start to build a certain level of synergy, a certain level of camaraderie. These people are generally not competing with each other. They're generally creating a product that is competing with a different set of products. And when we create groups of them, when we help them help themselves, they do amazing things. And here's the thing, who's an incremental developer? It's like everybody, right? When we look around, the incremental developer is the person who has the house across the street that's in disrepair, that would like it to be nicer and is ready to buy it and fix it up and turn it into a duplex. The incremental developer is the person who's working at a job that, you know, they're underemployed, they could do more, and in their evenings and weekends they want to work on a house. Sometimes it's a teacher who says, you know, I got the summer off and I'm going to spend it working on a house and then I'll do it, you know, in the evenings during the school year. Incremental developers are all over. They don't look weird, they're not strange, they're just you and me, right? Who have a passion generally for their neighborhood, for their block, for their place, and they want to work to make it better. There's groups that go around and train incremental developers. I would love to see the university do this. I would like to see community colleges do this. At the very least, we need to engage these organizations that are coming in saying, we can help you, we can help multiply the number that you have, we can get you up and running, we can connect you with support systems, and we can help you overcome obstacles, because being a good incremental developer is about really one thing and one thing only. It's the ability to overcome obstacles again and again and again and again to get stuff done. We can make this easier for them and have people who are ready to do those things that we need done. Finally, we need to localize finance. Remember when I talked about the Great Depression, that housing was funded locally. You went to a local bank, you got a local loan, it was all local. And because of that localness, because of the localness of the transaction, the market was sensitive to what we could pay. Because the market is now macro and nationalized, it's very top down, the capital is very centralized in a few places. There are people who are close to that capital, there are institutions close to that capital that get, in a sense, preferred treatment. But for you and me, we have transformed from the customer now to the product. If we want to change that and make the market more sensitive to you and me, we actually have to localize the finance. We're not going to do that for 30-year mortgages. We're not going to do that for 5/1 commercial real estate products. But we can do that, and we can do it at scale really easily for the entry-level products, the ones that will anchor our market at a lower price point. Let me walk you through some examples of places who are doing things like this. In Oswego, New York, they have created a program to do micro grants to people in struggling neighborhoods to improve their property. They had neighborhoods that were kind of in decline. One of the things they recognize is that in declining neighborhoods, people become reluctant to invest, which is a very logical thing if your neighborhood's kind of going downhill. The idea that you would go out and do something to invest in your property, it's just going to lose value anyway. Like, why would I do that? Smart people don't throw money away. So what they needed to do, again, in a kind of deflationary spiral kind of way, is to stop the decline. And so they created this microgrant program where they went out and they said, if you make something that makes your property better as viewed from the street, you've got to be able to see it from the street, something to improve your property, we will reimburse you up to 50%. They had maximum dollar amounts and stuff, but that was basically like the deal. 50%, you've got to be able to see it from the street. But you cannot apply as an individual. You can only apply as a block. And on the block, you've got to have at least 70% of the homes on the block participating. What happened was magical. A neighborhood in decline, kind of steady decline everywhere. All of a sudden, one block in a summer just became better. And then bam, another block over here just became better. And another block over here, bam, became better. And all of a sudden, people started to gain confidence in the trajectory of this neighborhood. This is not a neighborhood in decline. This is a neighborhood where things are getting better. And when people start to believe in their own place, what do? They start to spend their own money on it. They start to spend their own time on it. A lot of things that homeowners need to do are not that expensive. We're going to repaint the house. You know what? It's a lot of elbow grease, right? I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do that on a weekend. I'm going to plant some flowers in the front yard. I'm going to start taking care of things because you know what? The neighborhood's going in the right direction. Tiny amounts of money seeded belief into place. And people whose properties were in decline have now gone out and seen massive, massive, massive improvements. Without dislocating people, without kicking people out of the neighborhood and bringing in new people, they've seen property values appreciate massively. That's wealth that people in the community actually have now that they didn't have before. In Muskegon, Michigan, is a city that has a lot of vacant lots, a lot of empty properties that have been empty for decades. There's sewer, there's water, there's a street, so there's lots of public investment, but nobody has built there. What the city has said, if you want to build on one of these empty lots, we will use tax increment financing to pay down your mortgage. Cities use tax increment financing all the time for stupid projects. They subsidize people to come in and build big businesses. They lose money on it. They subsidize corporations to come in and build fast food franchises and things like this. Taco John's, they lose money on it. But here's the thing about housing, is that we're trying to get more of it. If you look at what cities do to build housing, they generally spend dumb money trying to subsidize down payments. With tax increment financing, what you're doing is you're saying, right now this lot is paying nothing in taxes. If we build a house on it, it's going to pay a lot more in taxes. We're going to take a portion of that, and we're going to use that to pay off a loan that we will make on this property. And so the taxes that you are paying are actually going to go to pay your mortgage down, getting you into the house substantially cheaper. This is a tool that cities can use over and over and over again and not lose any money on. Because they are going to be first in line. If someone sells that house, the city gets paid. If someone defaults on that mortgage, they're the first in line ahead of the banks to get their money back. The city is just utilizing their capacity to borrow money and to leverage it on a project with a near 100% guarantee that they will get paid back. We see places that are financing these backyard cottages. In California, there's a big program to do this. They've almost turned it into an impulse buy. All of us have had an experience at a used car lot, right? When you go in and you're like, yeah, I think I'm interested in this car, and then all of a sudden the paperwork is there with the pen, just sign. A lot of cars are purchased as impulse buys. Wasn't planning to buy a car, but you're here with the pen, and I'm just gonna sign. You can go into a lot now in California and say, I kind of like that accessory dwelling unit. They'll bring up your lot and they'll say, yep, sign here, we'll have it there in 60 days. They come out, they lay the foundation, they put in all the pipe and all the electric, they drop it in, you can start charging rent. They'll take care of the permits for you and everything. And they'll finance it for you over a reasonable amount of time so that you are not only improving your property value, but you're making bank every month. We can do this at scale, again, without losing any money, without the city having to spend any money. Because what you're doing is you're increasing the property value and you can recollect this. Again, you will be first in line. We see the same with special assessments. In Minnesota, we have a program. Okay, a special assessment. If we go out and take your dirt road and we pave it, we charge that to the property owner through a special assessment. It goes on your taxes and you pay it when you pay your taxes. In Minnesota, we can do this also for housing. And in many other states, you can do this for housing as well. We can go out and help build that backyard cottage. We can finance that accessory building. We can help you build a small home. And we can assess that out so that it comes out of your taxes. You would pay it. It would still be money you would have to pay, but it comes out of your taxes. We can get you that loan really cheap. I think of that elderly person living in the house where they have more house and not enough cash. One of the burdens there is trying to go to a bank and figure out, do I get a second mortgage? What happens if I don't rent the place? Da, 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 da. This is a way to lower the risk dramatically for that person by being able to special assess this. Again, the banks kind of hate this because you jump the line in front of the second mortgage, the primary mortgage. If you went out and got a second mortgage on this, you're back in line. If there's a default, you're the last one to get paid. It makes banks reluctant to do these kind of loans. Cities can do this through special assessments, and you in a sense become the first mortgage holder on the house. And then in a very simple way, we've seen places where cities will go out, or philanthropic institutions will go out and just co-sign loans. The bank doesn't want to write you a loan for that accessory apartment. The bank doesn't want to write you a loan for that backyard cottage. They're worried about the risk. They're worried about being third in line to get paid if something goes wrong. I get that. The city can go in and just say, I'll co-sign that loan. Just the same way the federal government went in the 1930s and said, we'll co-sign that loan to make good on it. The city can do this at essentially no cost. Very little risk. Again, if there's a default, the city's right there. The city is not going anywhere. We're the entity here that taxes the land. We're going to get our money back. Maybe it will take a little bit of a while, but we're not going to go broke doing this. We can easily do this at scale, at very, very little cost. There's more here, but I'm going to just stop and say local government, and to some extent philanthropy, but really local government has the capacity to finance low-cost, high-quality housing. And they can do it at scale, and they can do it at no cost to taxpayers. If we are serious about wanting to create affordable housing, if we want to make housing affordable, we need to have a market that is flooded with the anchor price point. Something that will anchor the rest of our market and keep it from going crazy. We can build those things in partnership with our neighbors. The city can step in and be part of that, and we can do it at scale, at no cost. This is the book. It's out today. I want to thank you for being here and being part of this, celebrating this with me. I have to come up with an ending that is more rousing than the one I just gave. No, that was supposed to be the crescendo, and I forgot. I thought that was the first line. I'm a rookie at this presentation anyway. I'll do better tomorrow. No, the idea is that we can do this. I really want to leave you with that, because I feel like oftentimes what housing does, and what housing policy has done to us, is it enfeebles us. It makes us feel like we're not in control. We can't do anything to affect this. We are in a sense powerless on the system. We're at its mercy. And the reality is that is not true. There are a lot of things that we can do. We can step up and take ownership of this. We can affect change. And there is no financial constraint to us doing this. There is no physical constraint to us doing this. There's no legal or regulatory constraint to us doing this. It just requires us to think about our place differently and our capacity differently. The reason I want to start here is because you all are weird, and you are willing to think about things differently. You are willing to look at things differently. You're willing to push things differently. And I'm here because I love telling your story to other people. I don't know if you saw the video we did about I-49 or your Allendale neighborhood and the beautiful things that are being done there. I would love to come back in a year or two and be able to tell the story about how you went out and sparked a housing revolution here from the bottom up. So you have everything you need to do it. So thank you so much for being here.
So there are some note cards. Luke, raise your hand, Luke. Luke has note cards if you need to write down a question. If you have questions, then we can pass them forward and I will speak them into the mic and then Chuck can answer. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Marone. I'm going to jump right in, and I might end up preempting a couple of things that people are thinking about, because you went there and then you skipped from duplexes into, let me show you what increments actually look like. And I think one place that you might get pushback here is on this idea that a neighborhood can withstand homes becoming duplexes or even quads, and that you're going to maintain a quality of life for everyone that's there without diminishing property value.
It's so interesting, and I want to really give voice to where that comes from. Chapter 4 in the book starts with J.C. Nichols. I can't remember his first name. J.C. Nichols. J.C. Nichols is the founders of ULI. He was a developer in Kansas City, and he used this phrase, permanent prosperity, to describe the post-war development pattern. We were going to go out and we were going to plan, we were going to create, we were going to build a permanent prosperity. We were going to build all these homes, and we were going to plan for where the schools would be and the parks would be and all this, and it would be perfect. It never turned out that way. And if you look at the way things worked out, what you saw is a progression, and I described this earlier with the echo effect and everybody's roof going bad at the same time and all that. What you saw, and people experienced this socially, is that it was at once an affluent neighborhood, and then over time it went bad, and poorer people moved in, and then it went bad, and poorer people moved in. And we started to associate what really was a self-imposed atrophy and decline with people of lesser means moving into a neighborhood. The reality is that really, really successful neighborhoods and really successful places thicken up over time. When you take a single family home and you add a backyard cottage, you actually improve the property value. When you take a single family home and you convert it into a duplex, you actually improve the property value of that property. Now, you're also adding more units in more places, and a lot of those will be at lower price points, and there will be people who are there paying less, AKA less affluent people. But in neighborhoods that do this successfully, and we can go around the country and point, that brings the property values up and up and up. It's that trajectory. The thing that people actually, I think, should naturally push back on or be concerned about is that your property values are going to go up, not down, and you are actually going to have pressure yourselves, if you're really successful, to do this on your own property, right? At some point, you're going to be like, well, I need to put in a backyard cottage too, because property values are going up, and this is what is justified on this property. You'll have people coming in trying to buy your home because they want to turn it into a duplex. It's the opposite. The reason why we associate adding more people with stagnation or with decline is because of that artificially imposed stagnation.
So it's really because one neighborhood is taking the brunt of it and other neighborhoods are kind of staying still?
Yeah, well, what our model is today, so incremental development, remember, I showed you those pictures of Brainerd in 1870, and then the next iteration, that was the same street, the same spot. You're looking at a little pop-up shack being torn down, a 2-3-story building being built, that being torn down, now a big brick granite building being built. This is like multiple iterations in the same place. Natural development iterates in that way. More people move to a place, the values go up, it's constantly getting better, you're thickening up, you're adding. The people who own that land are actually building wealth as the neighborhood improves. What the post-war experiment has done by stagnating neighborhoods is that it becomes a kind of disempowerment Olympics, right? Someone's going to get this apartment building. Who's it going to be? It's not my neighborhood. Oh, it's not my neighborhood. Oh, it's not mine. Oh, those people didn't show up at the meeting. We're going to put it in that neighborhood. The people with the least voice get stuck with it. And so we've come to associate that style of development or that bad development, and we don't want to be that neighborhood. So fight everything. Fight everything because you don't want to be the one who gets that. It is a byproduct. It's a very pernicious byproduct because it turns it into us against each other, as opposed to us building each other up.
So there's at least one planning commissioner in here right now.
Yeah.
Or two, I think, would snuck out.
Yeah?
Are you saying that we should just allow backyard cottages? I want to say ADUs so bad.
I know you do.
Are you saying we should allow this as a use by right?
Yes, you and I can say ADUs right here, right now. But I'm saying outside of this room, if you're going to try to talk to this as a policy thing amongst your friends and neighbors, don't call them ADUs because they'll think you're selling them something. Talk about backyard cottages because those have stories. My mother-in-law is going to live in the backyard cottage. The college student's going to live in the backyard cottage. The person who just got divorced and needs some place for 3 months while they get their life figured out is going to live in the backyard cottage. It's not scary at all. Those should be allowed over the counter, like show up at 9 a.m., leave at noon with permission, and every lot everywhere in the city.
We have a ton of them in our historic neighborhood.
Yeah,
They're now non-conforming.
Yeah, that is a sad. Okay,
So you don't look at it.
let me. I mentioned parking requirements. I could have spent a lot of time on zoning because non-conforming requirements are almost as bad as pernicious. We took zoning codes that were designed for the next version of suburban expansion. Like, it's derogatory called cookie cutter, but it literally is cookie cutter. What's the next version? And we took those standards and we imposed them on downtown neighborhoods that were really functional. And when we did that, we said all this stuff that has worked for a long time is now non-conforming. And it has created an artificial stagnation on our core neighborhoods. There should be no such, if it is there now, it should not be non-conforming. Like, there's no good reason to have it be, including lot sizes, right? Okay.
Pivot just like, I love this, but I'm going to pivot just a little bit. Before we do, I just want to say how much I admire the penmanship of the ladies. I know these are ladies. I wish I could write like you all. You're my hero. Can you talk or provide more information about micro grants?
Mhm.
How can state housing boards help with these ideas? And then first steps.
Thank you. Oswego, this is probably the coolest thing. The Oswego thing was a private group. They formed a nonprofit. They weren't even 501c3 at the beginning, and they just went and got donations. Their first donation they got was like a $10,000 grant from some local philanthropy. They eventually grew it into a 501c3, and I think they're doing a couple $100,000 a year now of grants. Half of that comes from the city, but it runs through this 501c3, this private organization. It is shocking how small the grants are. In fact, I think when they originally started, the max grant was like $150 or $200. Okay? So this is not like life-changing amount of money. The key to this program was getting people out talking to each other. And the stories that I heard when I was on the ground there was like, we go to this neighborhood and we're walking around, we're talking to people and they're like, yeah, I wanted to do this thing and I was kind of hoping people would want to do stuff. And I got $200. I was repainting my house. You know, it's not like game-changing money, but it was enough to make it worth it. But the thing is like we had to convince that guy over there to do something. And that guy like wouldn't come out of his house and talk to us. We kept going and talking to him. We finally got him out. He's like, I don't want to do anything. And we're like, could you just plant like a bush outside? And he's like, okay, if that makes you happy, I'll plant a bush. And so he went to Home Depot and bought like a $12 bush and planted it and got $6 back. It lubricated the conversation in a way that really freed up the human capital that transforms neighborhoods. That's what it was. So if you're saying, like, where do we get started? Nothing is too ridiculously small, really. That's what I learned from Oswego. Nothing is ridiculously small.
I'm interested in how a historic preservation, like, overlay can play into this, where you got people that are kind of fighting to keep their neighborhood alive through historic preservation, and come in with these conversations. Like, we want to stay friends with each
Yeah,
other.
I know. You want to. So, I always get in trouble when I talk about historic preservation. Let's say something nice about historic preservation. And then I'll say what I I think about historic preservation. So there was a period of time where the highest and best use of properties was to tear them down. And there was a real strong movement in the 60s and 70s to go in and tear down, particularly buildings that were high value, high quality, but didn't have a functional use at the time. You have a lot of buildings in York core downtown that when you look at the old photos were absolutely gorgeous, like beautiful buildings we would die to have back today. People were paying tens of thousands of dollars a year in taxes on those and really couldn't functionally make use of them. They were too big, they were scaled wrong, like there was, the amount of money they had to put into it to make it work wasn't cash flowing. And so they went and just tore them down because then you had one transaction cost and you had bare ground and you had low taxes. The historic preservation movement grew up to push back on that, really. That was where it's got its impetus, that's where it's got its verb, that's what really gave it its energy. Fighting that kind of thing. That kind of thing it still happens. I'm not gonna say it doesn't happen, but that's not the norm. The problem we deal with today is not people wanting to tear down those buildings, but people wanting to use those buildings and being encumbered by historic preservation mandates and requirements and what have you. I do not think we should, if a building has been standing for 100 years, it will stand for another 100 years. You should not tear it down. I have seen buildings that they're like, this is in horrible disrepair, there's no way to make use of it. And then innovative people come in and they show you exactly how to make use of it. We should figure out how to do that. But I have been in Italy in castles that were built in the 1400s that when you walked inside of them had carpeting and conference rooms and stuff. Like literally when we say historic preservation and we mean nothing can ever change, that is ahistorical. Historically, buildings kept their essence, they kept the essence of what they were, but they always evolved to fit the times. And we should always be able to take a building and make it better for today. But yes, no tearing it down. Like don't do that.
Okay, I like that.
Okay.
I can live with that.
Okay.
I'm only speaking for myself because I came to land these from historic preservation.
Right.
Well, okay, so Shreveport relies. Shreveport relies on philanthropy in many places where we should demand more of our government. Mm-hmm. Historically, this is for good reason, mm-hmm. But we can't do this without meaningful government intervention and buy-in. Can you speak to what sparked action in the examples you gave and concrete steps needed to get government buy-in and action?
So let me speak to that larger point. If you read our first two books, we really spend a lot of time talking about what individuals can do. How do you get started? But we also emphasize in both of those that the highest level of coordination for us in a place is a local government. And at Strong Towns, we believe in a very exalted role for local government. I think that is what is missing from our conversation today. Local government in the post-war development pattern has been positioned as the algae of a food chain of governments, right? Like we're the lowest form of government. Everything trickles down to us. If you go to City Hall orients vertically around capital flow. What's the money we can get from the state? What's the money we can get from the federal government? What developer will come in and spend money in our community? What big federal transportation project can we get to run through a neighborhood in our community? We just want the money to come in because this is good. That vertical orientation needs to be replaced with a horizontal orientation. We need a hyper-focus on our neighborhoods, on our people, on where people struggle, on what the next thing that we do is. And local government really needs to shift from being the algae in a food chain of governments, like the lowest, most pathetic form of government, to really a high form of us collaborating. And when we do that, we're gonna find that we have like an immense amount of tools to do amazing things. We really have all kinds of levers we can pull, regulations we can change, and incentive structures we can do that we're now using, in a sense, in nefarious bad ways on this old model. We can very much do it differently. I know that doesn't directly answer the question, but I do think that the most important candidate you're going to vote for in November is your mayor and city council. It is not president, it is not Senate, it is not House of Representatives. And if we recognize that, we will do a huge service to ourselves.
I've got one more here, or this is last call, if anyone had a question that they didn't get in. I think this is the last one, and then we can move on to,
Okay,
to some signings, some books.
I'll do that, and I want to get a picture with Taco John's sign over here too.
But
So.
also, just before I get to this one, I want to say we do have a housing commission out of Baton Rouge. It's a lot of money. And what I think of is the Jane Jacobs quote, cataclysmic money.
Yeah.
You know, where we could be using that state money in a different way, but it's going in to help finance these big projects. So like, when you see the downtown buildings right now that are being developed into mixed use, mixed income housing, a lot of that is state funding that's matching federal funding, where that state funding really could be used in a different way, but we just aren't imagining it, and we're not influencing people at that level.
Absolutely. Can I say one thing on that? Those are projects, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a local example of us trying to build affordable housing as opposed to make housing affordable.
Right.
And that's we will do those kind of things all day at like really heroic efforts and not really change things all that much.
So much so that your local builders will give a lot of money for state level candidates who
Yeah.
are going to turn around and give them those big projects to build that affordable housing.
Yeah.
And then they end up voting against public education. I serve on the city planning commission. A homeowner in my neighborhood applied to place a shipping container in her backyard as a dwelling unit. We wrote rules to allow it, including siding to make the unit match the house. She gave up. Don't look at me like that. I'm not that, it wasn't me.
What was the question?
It
was just a comment? I mean, yeah. Okay. I've been on planning commissions. I ran my own planning and engineering firm where I was the city planner for dozens of cities around Minnesota. I was on my hometown planning commission for 3 terms, so 9 years, not sequentially. I had to have a break every time. When planning commissions operate as glorified homeowners associations for the city, they really do a disservice to themselves and everybody else. I think that there are probably really good reasons why you wouldn't want shipping container houses, you know, but I get it, and I think that's a conversation to have. But planning commissions in general can be a source of good when they really try to tackle why is this thing in front of us when it doesn't need to be. And you have every planning commission set of bylaws is written that you are, in a sense, overseeing the staff. You're overseeing the technical staff. And oftentimes we look at it as like we're working for them, but it's the exact opposite. They're working for you. And so ask them, why is this in front of us? What do we do to change the code so that this doesn't come to us? How do we get this approved more quickly? What are the things that happen internally? Write this down. One of the cities that we've seen, there's a city in Florida, and I can't think of it right now, but they have there's a great planner on staff, and I want to get this story told right. Because what she did, Chris, I don't know if you've heard Edward tell this story. What she did is she started with, all right, here's something that we want, right? Yes, we would like a duplex to be built on this. We're all good with duplexes being built on this lot. Great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an application to build a duplex on this lot, and we're going to follow that application. And then I'm going to bring it back to you and show you all the steps and all the things that people had to go through to do what we all agree is a good thing, and why that is taking 6 months, and why it's not getting approved ultimately. And then what they did is they came back with like this long list of things, and they just started like erasing all of them. This doesn't need to take 2 weeks. Have it go here. This doesn't need to happen in this way. Okay, we need to change the code over here. All right, this person doesn't need to review this, or this person can, but they should only get 48 hours to do it, or like there's multiple backups here. In other words, they debugged internally their own system to deliver the products that they wanted. And they started the I'm sorry, I keep.
No, I want to be best friends to that planner because I was suggested that we do that for several
Yes.
different things here, right? Like,
Because what happens is that on the plan commission, we start with the rules. We're like, here's the rule. Should we change this rule? And then we're talking in the abstract about the rules. What we really need to say is, here's a product we want delivered. What is the process for delivering this product on this property? And how do we make that work? Because we really want this product.
and if it's in your backyard, if it meets all the requirements of health, safety, and welfare, then let you have it regardless of how ugly it is.
Let's go.
So thank you all so much for being here. And with that charming little ending, I wanted to say first, like, it means so much to have Chuck here on this day when your book is coming out. You know how much we love you.
Thank you.
And then I need to also thank Douglas White and Dr. Mary White, I believe she's here as well, and the College of Business, but also Leanne Chambers of LSUS. Thank you so much for your support, partnering with us for this. And lastly, on top of our members, and you can become a member too, and our advisory board, I also want to thank my partners in crime at the back, Tim, Luke, and Chris. And we'll be keeping it up outside so you can get your book and get your book signed after Chuck maybe does a quick interview. Thank you guys and have a good night.